How does a manga in the horror genre so messed up also gain the title of the worst one out there? Is it because of its shocking content, or is it because it's just plain bad? Today we're diving into DeadTube, a manga that is notorious for its disturbing and grotesque imagery as well as its poor execution in key areas. But we have to ask the question, is it really as bad as people make it out to be, or is this another case of crybabies on the internet? Now, before we begin, I'd like to issue a quick heads up about the graphic nature of this manga. We'll be discussing some disturbing themes, enough so that YouTube is happy, of course. So, here's your warning. Imagine a world where people are willing to do the most horrifying things for fame, money, and most importantly, views. Welcome to DeadTube, the manga that pushes the boundaries of horror and human depravity. Now, the premise for this series is really cool in my opinion, and it caught my attention instantly, but the execution of it is what really divided readers. DeadTube is a website where users post content and are rewarded with money based on the number of views they get. It is seen as a kind of get-rich scheme, as the website really does pay out the big bucks. The users are encouraged to post videos of anything that they want, which will give them the best chance to go viral and earn them the most views. But there is a catch. The person or people whose video gets the fewest views will have to pay for the expenses and the crimes of all the other participants. This is where the content the users begin to make spirals out of control, as videos involving sexual themes, violence, or both gain the most traction. This of course causes the creators to up the ante and go one step further than the other out of either greed or fear. Cool, right? Yeah, the DeadTube manga came out in April 2014. Its story is written by Mikoto Yamaguchi, and its art is drawn by Tota Kitagawa. The manga, it has 24 volumes and is currently still ongoing. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Well, I'll leave that for you to decide. So we're introduced to the small and timid Tomohiro Machiya, a member of the school research club who has always been a fan of filming. One day his life is flipped upside down as he is randomly called out by school idol Mai Mashiro, an extremely attractive girl on the swimming team. But what does she want with Machiya? Well, she wants him to follow her around for 2 days, filming her non-stop. This includes her swimming, sleeping, meeting with friends, and even in the bathroom as she goes, I guess luckily, #1. Believe it or not, this is not the weirdest part. On day 2, she wants him to film her on a date with a guy who used to bully poor Machiya back in school. Pretty awkward position, but nothing he can't handle. The bully thinks he's actually bullying Machiya more by doing this, but he actually isn't bothered. In fact, Machiya is bored. Now, the date ends with them all in an abandoned warehouse as Mashiro tells Machiya that he is now going to film her having sex with her date. Still, this doesn't bother Machiya as he asks himself why he is filming something so boring, until splat. We see that Mashiro has hit the bully over the head, causing blood to splatter everywhere. With a crazy psycho grin on her face, she continues to beat the bully to death while Machiya stands there filming as the bully screams out for help. Mashiro then delivers the final blow and asks Machiya if he filmed that all beautifully. He says, yeah, very beautifully, as he stands there with a chub on. Yes, sexually aroused by the violent act. Mashiro then steals his first kiss, but instead of the sweet and sincere taste of falling in love, all he got was the taste of blood. Mashiro then asks Machiya to film it beautifully next time too. Later on, Machiya finds out that this filming was all for a video Mashiro uploads to a website called DeadTube and is informed on all the details. From here, Machiya gets dragged deeper and deeper into the world of DeadTube and starts questioning his obscure relationship with Mashiro and the dark feelings lying within himself. DeadTube's introduction sets the tone of the series. It aims to be dark and very twisted and wants to shock the viewer, all while tackling the themes of the perverse, obsession, and internet culture. DeadTube does this really well in my opinion. I felt this tone and theme throughout the series, but there are definitely aspects that fall short of the potential this premise has to offer. Now, I will say that there are elements to this series that, if executed better, I think probably would have made this a much more compelling title to the masses. But where did DeadTube fall short? What are these aspects that let it down? Well, first of all, let's look at what makes DeadTube such a disturbing series, but not just in a good way. The series excels when it comes to the extreme levels of gore and violent imagery. Some of the brutal deaths and fights in this series are seriously, well, they're really good and they don't hold back at all. Nothing is off limits and DeadTube is famous for this. However, there is without a doubt a divide. A lot of people found the graphic violence on show in this series was often to the point of being quite excessive. I agree that it did go overboard and made you feel uneasy a lot, but isn't this the point of a manga like this? I know I didn't read this for sunshine and rainbows. I mean, I guess at times DeadTube used its extreme content for the sake of shock, and perhaps that made some readers feel that some of the shocking scenes came across as more of a cheap move to keep the reader's interest rather than being used to add more depth to the story. I didn't really see any of this hardcore violence as uncalled for personally. However, the main area where DeadTube's disturbing nature lost a lot of readers is in the same old area that lost readers and viewers in all of anime and manga, which of course is in the sexual content. Fanservice divides all audiences, and well, calling this fanservice is just plain wrong. The word looming over DeadTube is extreme, and the sexual stuff is, well, it's well within that bracket, maybe even more so. The series goes all out on all fronts, and the women of this series are without a doubt on the receiving end of this. One of the main complaints I saw was that the men who die in this series, well, they're killed off in a heartbeat, whereas the women have all sorts of messed up shit done to them, and it's shown in a lot more detail and of course for a lot longer. I agree that this is definitely the case with DeadTube. The women are extremely sexualized, and it's not just in the deaths, but in all of the messed up and perverted stuff that goes on within the story. So if you don't like the lewder stuff, then this aspect of DeadTube is seriously a no-go for you, as it is one of the most used elements in the series. It will definitely feel out of place for you, unnecessary, and, well, outright wrong. And though I don't agree with the treatment of the women in this series, again, this isn't a light-hearted harem isekai. This is a brutal representation of just how sick and twisted mankind is and the effed up shit that goes on in the world. DeadTube is dark, twisted, and unforgiving, elements that all, unfortunately, are not just works of fiction. And what I will say though is that Kitagawa's art style is insane throughout the series. At times, I honestly thought he was drawing the violent content as well as the disturbing sexual stuff, well, a little too well. But for a horror series such as DeadTube, this is exactly what you want. If it was drawn cheaply, then a lot of that shock factor would have easily looked like cheap content. However, for all the praise on the art of DeadTube, as well as understanding what the series was aiming for, well, what let it down? What gave DeadTube the title of one of the worst among many readers? Well, although DeadTube is packed full of shocking content, the story itself, well, it's riddled with issues. What good is an amazing gore fest if the story is absolute garbage? It makes the extreme levels DeadTube goes to feel, well, pretty pointless, like a series where it's all made for the sense of being, well, perverse. Unfortunately, when it comes to the story side of things, this, for me, is where it dropped the ball. I don't think it's all bad though. The main areas where it doesn't deliver are probably the lack of character development, weak motivations, and some pretty poor plot points. What I really liked about DeadTube was how it was set up in arcs where there was like a different game at play. There was, a mystery to be figured out and overcome. You didn't know who to trust, and the outcome was usually pretty smart. But I did find that this ultimately became a repetitive cycle, and the progression and stakes became, well, more meaningless over time. DeadTube, as a series, just like the users making videos within it, had to one-up itself every single time. And for me, well, I think the series hit its peak way too early. It was as if the ending of the series came way earlier than expected, and the conclusion as well as what happened next was just not up to the same standard. Like, I personally still enjoyed the series past this point, but I wasn't as hooked as I was in the first half of it. I feel like a lot more could have been done with its main characters, Machia and Mashiro. In the beginning, I loved seeing where their characters were going, but after that halfway point, they felt like they were kind of just characters who were simply thrown into the new situations as like gimmicks or a cheap shock to keep the readers interested in the new story point. The best way I can describe it is like in one of the new Star Wars series, you know, they'll occasionally throw in something to do with Anakin or Darth Vader, and ultimately for us viewers, that's like the best part of the whole series, and we just want more of that. But it's simply used just to keep us around, hoping that we will get more of that. Ultimately, I think DeadTube is a story of an early peak and wasted potential. It aimed to be a cool and dark twist on what internet fame is all about, how someone can fall down a path where they themselves become desensitized to violent acts, as well as the dark and very perverse nature of human obsession. For me, DeadTube's concept of an underground website rewarding people for uploading violent or illegal acts could have been a fascinating exploration of the dark side of humanity. But the poor writing and lack of depth turned it into a missed opportunity. Many readers, in fact, sing the praises of similar series like Gantz and Battle Royale as examples of how DeadTube failed. But I didn't hate DeadTube, not at all. I actually really enjoyed its first half and would strongly recommend that you give it a chance for yourself to make up your own mind. I agree that the second half had many more flaws, but I still enjoyed reading it, so give it a go. And if you want a really ecchi and lewd horror manga to check out, then make sure to watch this video on the series Ingoshima. That was a wild ride. I'll see you over there for that one. Till then, peace.